In the depths of Evergreen Forest, where towering pines stand guard against time, a remarkable story unfolded that would touch the hearts of everyone in Pine Grove. A tale of an unlikely hero with 4 paws and a heart of gold, whose actions would forever change the lives of the Anderson family. If you think you know where this story is heading, think again, because what the family does next will leave you in tears. The morning had started like any other in Pine Grove, a small town nestled at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains. But by nightfall, the entire community would witness a miracle that would remind them of the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals. This is the story of Max, a stray dog who had been wandering the streets for months, and 8-year-old Tommy Anderson, whose paths would cross in the most unexpected and dramatic way. If you're ready to experience a story that will restore your faith in miracles, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us share more incredible stories like this one with people around the world. Pine Grove was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where children still played outside until sunset, and where the community came together during times of need. The Anderson family had lived there for 3 generations. Their modest, 2-story home just a block away from Riverside Park, where the forest began to creep into town. Tommy Anderson was known throughout Pine Grove Elementary as the curious kid who could never sit still. With bright blue eyes that sparkled with mischief and unruly brown hair that seemed to have a mind of its own, he was always ready for an adventure. His mother, Rachel, often joked that he must have inherited his grandfather's explorer spirit. That fateful Saturday morning in October, the autumn air was crisp and clear, painting the forest in brilliant shades of red and gold. Tommy had been begging his parents to let him join his older sister Emily and her friend Lucas on their traditional weekend hike. After months of pleading and promises to stay close to Emily, his parents finally agreed. "Remember, Tommy," Rachel called out as she adjusted his bright red jacket, "stay with your sister at all times. No wandering off." David, Tommy's father, stood in the doorway, his coffee mug steaming in the morning chill. He was a cautious man by nature, having worked as a local insurance agent for 15 years. The forest might have been their backyard, but he knew nature demanded respect. "I promise, Mom." Tommy bounced on his heels, barely able to contain his excitement. Emily, at 12, rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her small smile. She might complain about having to watch her little brother, but deep down, she was proud to be trusted with the responsibility. As the children set off toward their usual trail, none of them noticed the scraggly figure watching from the edge of the forest. Max, a medium-sized mixed-breed dog with tan and white fur, had been surviving on his own for months. The locals knew him as the gentle stray who would sometimes appear at their back doors, accepting food but never letting anyone get close enough to catch him. Mrs. Margaret Wilson, their elderly neighbor who lived at the corner house, had been trying to gain Max's trust for weeks. That morning, as she set out her usual offering of leftover meatloaf, she noticed something different about him. The usually cautious dog seemed restless, his ears perked up, his attention focused on something in the distance. "What's got you so worked up today, boy?" she wondered aloud. But Max had already disappeared into the tree line, following some instinct that only he understood. The morning unfolded peacefully as Emily and Lucas led the way along the familiar trail, pointing out interesting plants and birds to an enthusiastic Tommy. The autumn breeze carried the sweet scent of dying leaves and pine needles, and sunlight filtered through the canopy above, creating dancing patterns on the forest floor. None of them could have predicted how quickly their pleasant morning hike would turn into a parent's worst nightmare, or how a stray dog's instincts would set in motion a chain of events that would change their lives forever. If this story has captured your attention so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next in this incredible tale of courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between a child and his unexpected guardian angel. Stay tuned as we reveal how a simple hiking trip turns into a race against time, and how Max, the lonely stray, becomes the hero no one saw coming. This story will make you believe in miracles, and the family's response to Max's bravery will touch your heart in ways you never expected. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes our greatest blessings come in the most unexpected packages. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you these touching stories of hope and inspiration. As the morning progressed, Tommy's excitement began to overshadow his promise to stay close to Emily and Lucas. The forest seemed to call to him with its mysterious shadows and hidden treasures. Every rustle of leaves held the promise of discovery. Every fallen log concealed potential adventures. While Emily and Lucas walked ahead, discussing their upcoming school project, Tommy's attention wandered to a patch of unusually colored mushrooms. Just off the trail, back at home, Rachel Anderson couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. She stood at the kitchen window, absently drifted to the news report she'd seen last week about increased bear activity in the area. "I know," she said. "I just can't help worrying. Tommy's so..." "Tommy," David chuckled, understanding exactly what she meant. Their son's curiosity had led to more than a few adventures over the years. Like the time he'd decided to create an archaeological dig washing the same plate for the third time, her eyes drawn to the tree line where her children had disappeared. Earlier, David noticed her distraction as he prepared to head to the office for a few hours of weekend work. "They'll be fine, Rachel," he assured her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Emily's responsible, and they know these trails better than anyone." Rachel forced a smile, but her mind in Mrs. Wilson's prized flower garden, or when he'd attempted to build a treehouse using only twine and fallen branches. Meanwhile, in the forest, Max the stray dog moved silently through the underbrush, his keen senses alert to every sound and movement. Years on the streets had taught him to be cautious, but something about this morning felt different. The usual peaceful rhythm of the forest seemed slightly off, like a song played in the wrong key. The dog's past was a mystery to the townspeople of Pine Grove. Some said he'd escaped from a crashed car during a storm last winter. Others believed he'd been abandoned by passing tourists. Mrs. Wilson, who'd taken to calling him her boy even, though she couldn't get close to him, swore he had the bearing of a trained service dog who'd lost his way. Whatever his origins, Max had developed an uncanny ability to sense when something wasn't right. He'd once barked until someone noticed Mr. Thompson's garage was on fire, and another time he'd led Mrs. Wilson to an injured deer trapped in her garden fence. Today, that same instinct had him following the hiking trail, keeping his distance but always aware of the three young voices that echoed through the trees. Tommy, oblivious to both his sister's increasingly irritated calls and the watchful presence of Max, continued to drift further from the path. The mushrooms had led to an interesting beetle, which led to a peculiar tree formation. And before he realized it, he was standing in an unfamiliar clearing. The excited chatter of Emily and Lucas had faded to a distant murmur. "Emily!" he called out, his voice smaller than he expected. The forest suddenly seemed different, darker, bigger, more imposing. The friendly trees that had beckoned with promises of adventure now loomed overhead like stern giants. "Lucas!" Tommy tried again, louder this time. His heart began to race as he spun around, trying to recognize something, anything that might point him back to the trail. But every direction looked the same, a maze of trees and shadows that seemed to shift and change with each passing cloud. From his hidden vantage point, Max's ears perked up at the change in the child's voice. He could smell the fear beginning to roll off the young boy in waves, could hear the slight tremor in his calls. The dog's muscles tensed as he watched Tommy. Make the worst possible choice, starting to run. Emily's first inkling that something was wrong came when she turned to point out a woodpecker to her brother. "Tommy, look at the..." The words died in her throat as she realized he wasn't there. "Tommy," she called, her voice rising with the first edges of panic. "Tommy, this isn't funny." Lucas immediately stopped talking about their science project and joined in, calling for Tommy. Their voices echoed through the forest, but only silence answered back. Emily's hands began to shake as she pulled out her phone, only to find what she dreaded most: no signal. "We have to go back," she said, her voice cracking. "We have to tell Mom and Dad." The guilt was already crushing her. She'd had one job, to watch her little brother, and she'd failed. What if he was hurt? What if he'd fallen? What if... As if sensing her spiraling thoughts, Lucas grabbed her hand. "He can't have gone far. Let's head back and get help. They'll find him, Emily."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Unknown to them, Tommy was running deeper into the forest, tears streaming down his face as panic took over. Every tree looked the same. Every path seemed wrong. His foot caught on an exposed root, sending him sprawling onto the forest floor. He lay there for a moment, the taste of dirt and fear bitter in his mouth, before curling into a ball and doing what any scared 8-year-old would do. He began to sob. The sound of the child's distress carried through the trees, reaching Max's sensitive ears. The dog, for just a moment, generations of street-learned caution warring with a deeper instinct. Then, with a decisive, hesitated huff, he began to move toward the sound of crying. Back in town, Rachel's unease had grown into full-blown anxiety. She'd called Emily's phone 3 times with no answer. David had assured her they were probably just in a dead zone, common enough in the forest, but now even he was starting to worry. "I'm coming home," he said over the phone, already packing up his desk at the office. "We'll give them another 30 minutes, and if they're not back..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Rachel was already pulling on her hiking boots when she heard running footsteps approaching their front door. Her heart stopped as she opened it to find Emily and Lucas, out of breath and terrified. "Mom," Emily gasped between sobs, "Tommy's gone. We can't find him anywhere." And that's when the real nightmare began. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The next part of this incredible tale will show you just how far a stray dog will go to save a child, and how one act of heroism can change multiple lives forever. The next few hours in Pine Grove became a blur of urgent activity. David immediately called the local police, while Rachel contacted Forest Ranger Jack Miller, who knew Evergreen Forest better than anyone. Within an hour, the Andersons' front yard had become an impromptu command center, with Officer Steve Martinez coordinating with volunteer search teams. "The temperature's dropping," Ranger Miller announced, studying weather readings on his tablet. "We've got maybe 4 hours of daylight left, and there's a cold front moving in." He spread out a detailed map of the forest on the hood of his truck, marking the areas where Emily and Lucas had been hiking. Rachel stood nearby, clutching Tommy's favorite dinosaur plush toy, something familiar for him to hold on to when they found him. The word "when," not "if," echoed in her mind like a prayer. Emily sat on the front porch steps, tear-streaked and silent, replaying every moment of the morning in her mind, wondering how she hadn't noticed her brother wandering away. Mrs. Wilson had joined the growing crowd of neighbors, bringing thermoses of hot coffee for the search teams. As she handed out steaming cups, she suddenly realized something. "Max," she said, turning to Officer Martinez. "Max hasn't been by for his breakfast today. That's never happened before." Most of the adults barely registered her comment about a stray dog, but Ranger Miller's head snapped up. "The dog might have seen something," he said. Animals notice the things we don't. Which direction does he usually come from? Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Tommy had stopped running. His red jacket was torn from his fall, his knees were scraped, and his throat was raw from crying. The forest had become an alien place, full of strange sounds and shifting shadows. The afternoon light, filtering through the canopy, was taking on the golden quality that meant sunset wasn't far off, and with it would come darkness. A twig snapped somewhere behind him, and Tommy spun around, his heart pounding. "Hello?" he called out, his voice trembling. "Emily? Dad?" Another rustle, closer this time, made him stumble backward until his back pressed against a tree trunk. That's when he saw them. Two gleaming eyes in the undergrowth. Tommy's breath caught in his throat as a large shape emerged from the bushes. For a moment, his terror-struck mind couldn't process what he was seeing. It wasn't the bear he'd feared, but a dog, lean and rough-looking, with tan and white fur matter with burrs and leaves. Max approached the frightened child slowly, his head low, tail wagging gently to show he meant no harm. He'd been tracking Tommy's scent for the past hour, following the erratic path of panic through the forest. Now that he'd found the boy, ancient instincts kicked in, instincts that told him this small, scared human needed protection. Tommy remained frozen against the tree, tears still rolling down his cheeks. "Good dog," he whispered, the words more question than statement. Max inched closer, finally close enough to gently bump his nose against Tommy's hand. The simple gesture of comfort broke something in Tommy, and he collapsed forward, throwing his arms around the dog's neck. Max allowed the embrace, his body warm and solid against Tommy's shivering form. For several minutes they stayed like that, the boy crying into the stray dog's fur, while Max stood guard, his ears constantly moving to track the sounds of the forest around them. Back at the search command center, teams were being dispatched in a grid pattern. David had insisted on joining one of the search parties, while Rachel stayed behind in case Tommy somehow found his way back. The afternoon, air had taken on a bitter chill, and the sky was beginning to cloud over. "Tommy!" The forest echoed with dozens of voices calling his name. Search teams with trained dogs were working their way through the underbrush, but the increasing wind was making it difficult for them to pick up any scent. In the forest, Max's ears perked up at the distant sounds of searching. He gave Tommy a gentle nudge, trying to get the boy to stand up. Tommy had stopped crying, but exhaustion and cold were setting in, making him sluggish. Max whined softly, pawing at the ground. "You want me to follow you?" Tommy asked, remembering all the movies he'd seen where clever dogs led people to safety. Max barked once, quietly, then took a few steps in a specific direction before looking back at Tommy expectantly. Tommy hesitated. His parents had always warned him about following strange animals, but something in Max's steady gaze made him trust this scruffy guardian angel. With shaking legs, he stood up and took a step toward the dog. Max wagged his tail encouragingly and continued forward, constantly checking to make sure Tommy was following. What Tommy didn't know was that Max wasn't leading him randomly. The dog had survived on these streets and in this forest long enough to know the way back to town, to the safe places where humans gathered. He could smell the search parties, but they were too far away, moving in the wrong directions. The quickest route back was the one he took every morning to Mrs. Wilson's house for breakfast. As they walked, Max stayed close to Tommy, occasionally pressing against his leg when the boy's steps faltered. When Tommy needed to rest, Max would stop and sit patiently, but never for too long. The dog seemed to sense that time was crucial, that the falling temperature and approaching darkness were enemies they needed to outrun. Tommy began talking to Max as they walked, his young mind finding comfort in filling the forest's eerie silence with words. "My mom's probably really worried," he said, stumbling slightly over a fallen branch. "And Emily's gonna be so mad at me. I didn't mean to go so far. I just wanted to look at those mushrooms." Max listened to the child's chatter with ears, perked forward, maintaining his steady pace. When Tommy's voice started to fade, the exhaustion clearly taking its toll, Max would nudge him gently or give a soft bark of encouragement. The search teams, meanwhile, were growing increasingly desperate. The temperature had dropped another 5 degrees, and the wind was picking up, carrying the threat of rain. Ranger Miller was consulting with Officer Martinez about bringing in additional resources from neighboring counties when a cry went up from the direction of Riverside Park. "Over here! They're over here!" Mrs. Wilson, who had been watching from her front porch, was the first to spot them. A small figure in a torn red jacket emerging from the tree line, accompanied by a familiar tan and white dog. Tommy was leaning heavily against Max, his face dirty and tear-streaked, but very much alive. The next few moments erupted in a flurry of activity. Rachel's scream of joy could be heard across the neighborhood as she ran toward her son. Search team members converged on the scene, and someone was already calling David's search party back. But before anyone could reach them, something remarkable happened. Max, who had never let a single person touch him in all his months as a stray, who had always kept his distance even from kind Mrs. Wilson, didn't run away. Instead, he stayed right beside Tommy, supporting the exhausted child until the boy was safely in his mother's arms. If you're touched by this story so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. You won't want to miss what happens next. The family's reaction to Max's heroism will warm your heart in ways you never expected. The scene at Pine Grove Community Hospital was a whirlwind of activity. Tommy had been rushed to the emergency room for evaluation, with Rachel refusing to leave his side. David paced the waiting room, while Emily sat quietly in a corner, still processing the events of the day. But perhaps the most surprising element of the aftermath was happening outside the hospital entrance. There, sitting patiently by the sliding doors, was Max. The same dog who had evaded capture for months was now refusing to leave, his eyes fixed on the entrance where Tommy had disappeared. Mrs. Wilson stood nearby, hardly believing what she was seeing. "He won't even take food from me," she explained to Officer Martinez, who had come to take statements about the incident. "It's like he's standing guard." Dr. Sarah Cooper, the local veterinarian, had been called to examine Max from a distance. "He's undernourished," she observed, "and probably needs treatment for parasites, but his behavior is remarkable. This isn't just any stray. He's had training somewhere in his past." As the night progressed, Tommy was cleared by the doctors. Apart from mild hypothermia, dehydration, and some scrapes and bruises, he was physically fine. The emotional impact, however, was evident in the way he kept asking about Max. "Is he still there?" Tommy would ask anyone who entered the room. "Can I see him? He saved me, Mom. He's the bravest dog ever." Rachel and David exchanged looks. Over their son's head. They had never been dog people. Their busy lives and David's concerns about the responsibilities of pet ownership had always pushed the idea aside, despite Tommy's occasional pleas. But now, watching their son's face light up every time he talked about Max, something was shifting in their perspective. Emily, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "It's my fault Tommy got lost," she said, her voice breaking. "But Max brought him back when I couldn't." She looked at her parents with tears in her eyes. "We can't just let him go back to the streets, can we?" David stepped out of the hospital room and walked to the entrance, where Max still maintained his vigil. The dog's ears perked up at his approach, but he didn't run away. For the first time, David really looked at the animal who had saved his son's life, saw the intelligence in his eyes, the noble bearing despite his rough appearance, the unwavering loyalty he'd shown to a child he'd just met. Mrs. Wilson appeared, beside him, holding a cup of coffee. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes the best things in life come in unexpected packages. That dog's been watching over our neighborhood for months, never asking for anything in return. Today, he brought your boy home." Back in Tommy's hospital room, Rachel was helping her son eat some soup when David returned. The look on his face told her he'd made a decision. Before he could speak, Dr. Cooper knocked on the door. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, stepping inside. "But I wanted to talk to you about Max. I've contacted several rescue organizations, and we can arrange for him to be taken to a shelter where he can be rehabilitated and eventually adopted." "No!" Tommy's cry was instant and heartbroken. "Please, he can't go to a shelter. He's my friend." David cleared his throat. "Actually, Dr. Cooper, if Max can be rehabilitated, if you think it's safe, we'd like to discuss another option." The next few weeks transformed not just Max's life, but the entire Anderson family. Under Dr. Cooper's guidance, they began the slow process of earning Max's trust. The first breakthrough came when they brought Tommy out to the hospital parking lot. Max immediately approached him, tail wagging, allowing the boy to pet him while the adults watched in amazement. "He just needed the right reason to trust humans again," Dr. Cooper observed as she carefully approached to begin Max's medical evaluation. The dog remained calm, seeming to understand that these people were trying to help. The Andersons' garage was converted into a temporary shelter for Max, with Mrs. Wilson offering her expertise from months of trying to befriend him. Slowly but surely, the dog began to accept his new reality. Each day brought small victories, eating from David's, and letting Rachel brush his coat, playing fetch with Emily in the backyard. Tommy's nightmares about being lost in the forest were soothed by Max's presence. The dog seemed to sense when the boy was distressed, often alerting the family by pawing at their doors or windows if Tommy was having a bad dream. The transformation in the family was just as remarkable. David, who had always believed pets were too much responsibility, found himself spending his lunch breaks reading about dog training. Rachel discovered that having Max around made the house feel more secure, especially on nights when David worked late. Emily's guilt over losing Tommy gradually healed as she watched her brother and Max become inseparable friends. 1 month after the rescue, the Andersons formally adopted Max. The ceremony at Pine Grove Animal Haven was attended by half the town, including Officer Martinez, Ranger Miller, and of course, Mrs. Wilson, who brought her famous homemade dog, treats for the occasion. Dr. Cooper had discovered that Max was about 4 years old, and based on his behavior and training responses, had likely been a service or working dog in his past. "Sometimes," she told the family, "dogs like Max just need to find their true purpose." Saving Tommy wasn't just luck, it was instinct, training, and heart, all coming together at the right moment. The local newspaper ran a story about Max's rescue, which caught the attention of regional media. Soon, the tale of the heroic stray, who saved a lost child, began spreading across social media. The Andersons received messages from around the country, many from people sharing their own stories of being rescued by dogs. But Max remained unchanged by his newfound fame. Each morning, he still walked with Tommy to the bus stop, waited patiently for him to return from school, and slept outside his room at night. The only difference was that now, instead of searching for his next meal or a safe place to sleep, he had a family, a home, and a purpose. Mrs. Wilson still left food out every morning, but now it was for other strays who might need help. "Every dog deserves a chance," she would say, watching Max play with Tommy in the yard. "Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them." If this story has touched your heart, remember to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in fur, and that second chances can lead to beautiful new beginnings. Your support helps us continue sharing these incredible stories of hope, love, and the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals. 6 months after Max's heroic rescue, Pine Grove had become a different place. The story of the stray dog who saved a lost child had sparked a movement that nobody could have predicted. It began small, with the Anderson family sharing their experience at local community meetings, but soon grew into something much larger. Tommy, now more confident than ever with Max by his side, had become an unexpected ambassador for animal rescue. His school presentation about Max's story had moved his teacher to tears, and soon other classes were asking him to share his experience. The once shy boy stood proudly beside his four-legged hero, explaining to his peers how Max had not only saved his life, but had changed it forever. "Max taught me that being lost doesn't mean you can't be found," Tommy told his classmates. And buried in Max's fur, and sometimes the ones who need saving the most are the ones who end up saving you. The impact on Emily was equally profound. Her initial guilt over losing Tommy had transformed into a passion for animal welfare. With help from Mrs. Wilson and Dr. Cooper, she started a junior volunteer program at Pine Grove Animal Haven. Every weekend, teenagers from her school would gather to help care for rescued animals, learning the same patience and compassion that had helped Max transition from a street dog to a beloved family member. "It's not just about feeding them," Emily would explain to new volunteers. "It's about showing them they can trust again. Every dog has a story, just like Max did." David Anderson, once skeptical of pet ownership, had become one of the shelter's strongest advocates. His insurance office now displayed photos of adoptable pets, and he worked with Dr. Cooper to create a fund helping families cover initial veterinary costs for rescued animals. The Max's Second Chance Fund had already helped 20 local families adopt pets they otherwise couldn't afford. "I used to think responsibility meant avoiding complications," David admitted during a community fundraiser. "Now I understand that sometimes the biggest responsibilities bring the greatest rewards." Rachel found herself hosting monthly Rescue Mom meetings in their home, where families who had adopted shelter pets would gather to share stories and support each other. Max would attend each meeting, carrying himself with a dignity that seemed to say he understood his role as inspiration. The sight of him playing with other rescued dogs in their backyard never failed to bring smiles to everyone's faces. Mrs. Wilson's front porch had become an unofficial gathering spot for local dog lovers. Her morning ritual of leaving food for strays had evolved into a proper feeding station, complete with fresh water and shelter for rainy days. She worked with Ranger Miller to monitor the forest's edge for any animals in need, and her quick reporting had helped save several injured wildlife creatures. "Max showed us that every creature deserves compassion," she would say, watching the neighborhood children safely interact with rescue dogs under her supervision. "He opened our eyes to the difference we can make if we just take that first step." The transformation extended beyond just pets. Pine Grove had discovered a new sense of community purpose. The local hardware store started donating materials for building dog houses. The grocery store implemented a pet food donation program. Even the town's annual festival added a rescue parade, where adopted pets and their families could celebrate second chances. Officer Martinez found that reports of stray animals were handled differently now. Instead of being seen as nuisances, they were treated as opportunities for rescue and rehabilitation. The police department worked closely with Dr. Cooper's clinic to ensure every animal had a chance at finding their own happy ending. "Max's story reminds us that every life has value," Officer Martinez commented during a community safety meeting. "Sometimes we need to look past the surface to see the hero within." But perhaps the most remarkable change was in Max himself. The once wary stray had blossomed into a confident, gentle guardian. He seemed to have a special sense for people in need, often approaching those who looked troubled or sad during his walks with the family. Several times, his behavior had helped identify lost pets in the area, as if he remembered his own days of wandering and wanted to help others find their way home. One particularly touching moment came when a young girl, newly moved to Pine Grove, got separated from her mother during the town's summer festival. Before panic could set in, Max had already guided her to the information booth, staying with her until her frightened mother arrived. The incident made the local news again, with headlines celebrating Max's continuing heroics. "He's not just our hero anymore," Tommy proudly told the reporter. "He's everybody's hero." The Andersons' home had become a testament to the power of unconditional love. Photos of Max's gradual transformation from scared stray to beloved family member lined their walls. Each image told a story. Max's first Christmas with them, covered in wrapping paper. Max wearing a party hat at Tommy's birthday. Max sleeping peacefully between Tommy and Emily during movie nights. Dr. Cooper often used Max's case in her talks about animal rehabilitation. The key was patience and understanding, she would explain to veterinary students who visited her clinic. The Andersons didn't just offer Max a home, they offered him time to heal, space to trust and love to grow. As Pine Grove approached the one-year anniversary of Tommy's rescue, the town council announced plans for a permanent memorial. A bronze statue of Max would be placed in Riverside Park, near the forest edge where he had led Tommy to safety. The plaque would read, "Every act of kindness creates a ripple effect." Max's story reminds us that heroes come in all forms, and second chances can change not just one life, but an entire community. If this story has inspired you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with others who might need a reminder of the extraordinary impact one act of kindness can have. Your support helps us continue bringing these heartwarming tales of hope and transformation to audiences worldwide. Let us know in the comments if you have your own rescue story to share, because every story of compassion deserves to be heard. Just as Pine Grove was preparing for the unveiling of Max's memorial statue, an unexpected challenge tested the bonds between the heroic dog and his family. It began on a crisp autumn morning, almost identical to the day Max had saved Tommy a year ago. Dr. Cooper had called the Andersons with unexpected news. After months of searching through missing pet databases and veterinary records, she had finally found a match for Max's microchip. Before he had become a stray, Max, or Duke as he had been called then, had belonged to a military family in Colorado. His original owner was a veteran who passed away, Dr. Cooper explained gently to the assembled family in her office. But his daughter has been searching for Max ever since he ran away during the funeral procession. She's on her way to Pine Grove. The news hit the Anderson family like a thunderbolt. Tommy's face went pale, his hand instinctively tightening in Max's fur. Emily, who had been taking notes for her animal shelter blog, dropped her pen. Rachel and David exchanged worried glances, both thinking the same thing. Could they lose Max? "But he's our dog now," Tommy protested, tears welling in his eyes. "We adopted him legally. He saved my life." Dr. Cooper nodded sympathetically. "Yes, the adoption is legally binding. But I thought you should know his history and why he might have some of the training that helped him save Tommy. His original owner was a canine training instructor." As they drove home, the car was unusually quiet. Max, sensing the tension, moved between Tommy and Emily in the back seat, offering comfort with his presence. David kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching his children's worried faces. "We should meet her," Rachel finally said, breaking the silence. "Max's story didn't begin with us, even if we hope it ends with us. We owe it to him to understand where he came from." The next few days were filled with anxiety. Tommy barely left Max's side, even sleeping on the floor next to him instead of in his bed. Emily threw herself into researching military working dogs and their bonds with their handlers' families. The whole house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for a verdict that could change everything. Sarah Mitchell, the daughter of Max's original owner, arrived on a Thursday afternoon. She was a tall woman in her 30s, with kind eyes that immediately filled with tears when she saw Max. The dog's reaction surprised everyone. He approached her slowly, sniffed her hand, and then gave a soft whine of recognition. "Duke," she whispered, kneeling down, "I can't believe it's really you." Tommy watched from behind his mother's legs, fighting back tears. But what happened next would become another chapter in Max's extraordinary story. Sarah didn't try to claim Max or challenge the adoption. Instead, she asked if she could tell them about the dog's past, about the hero he had been before becoming their hero. The Andersons invited her to dinner, and over Mrs. Wilson's famous pot roast, which she insisted on bringing over, they learned the full story of their beloved pet. Max had been trained by Sarah's father, James Mitchell, a veteran who specialized in training search and rescue dogs. Dad always said Duke, Max, was special. He had an instinct for finding people that couldn't be taught. When Dad got sick, Max never left his side. She explained how Max had disappeared during the funeral procession, breaking free from his leash when the gun salute startled him. "We searched for months, but somehow he had made his way across 3 states. Now I know why. He had another mission waiting for him." As Sarah shared photos of Max with his first family, something beautiful happened. Instead of creating division, the story of Max's past brought everyone closer together. Tommy and Emily eagerly asked questions about Max's training, finally understanding why he had known exactly what to do when Tommy was lost. "He's not just a hero," Sarah said, watching Max move between Tommy and Emily, making sure both children felt equally loved. "He's a guardian angel who's touched multiple lives. My father would be so proud to know his beloved partner went on to save another life." Before leaving, Sarah gave the Andersons a special gift, Max's original training, medals and certificates. "These belong with him," she said, "with the family who gave him a second chance to be who he was always meant to be." The experience transformed the Andersons' understanding of their 4-legged family member. Max wasn't just a rescued stray who had saved Tommy. He was a highly trained service dog who had overcome his own loss and trauma to find a new purpose. The story added another layer to Pine Grove's memorial celebration. At the statue's unveiling ceremony, both the Andersons and Sarah Mitchell stood together, celebrating a dog who had bridged 2 families with his extraordinary heart. Tommy, who had been worried about losing Max, found himself proud to share his dog's story with even more people. "Max has 2 families who love him," he told the gathered crowd, "and that just makes him even more special." The bronze statue captured Max in his finest moment, alert, protective, ready to help. But the real Max, standing beside Tommy with his tail wagging, reminded everyone that the greatest heroes often come with fur, 4 paws, and hearts big enough to save not just 1 family, but 2. Local artist Jennifer Chen, who had created the statue, spoke about incorporating elements of both chapters of Max's life into the design. "If you look closely," she explained, "you'll see his military training tags as well as his Pine Grove rescue tag. This statue honors not just a moment of heroism, but a lifetime of service and love." The ceremony ended with a surprise announcement, inspired by Max's story and the connection between his 2 families. The Pine Grove Animal Haven was launching a new program specifically focused on reuniting lost service dogs with their families, while ensuring new bonds weren't broken. The Max Mitchell Anderson Initiative, Dr. Cooper announced, will help other communities navigate similar situations with compassion and understanding. Sometimes, as Max has shown us, love doesn't divide, it multiplies. If this heartwarming story has touched you, please don't forget to subscribe and share it with others. Your support helps us continue sharing these incredible tales of hope, healing, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and animals. Leave a comment below about how a special animal has impacted your life, because every story of love deserves to be heard. As winter approached Pine Grove once again, Max's influence continued to grow in unexpected ways. The Max Mitchell Anderson initiative had already helped 3 other communities reunite lost service dogs with their families, while the town's own transformation had caught the attention of national media. One chilly morning, as Tommy and Max walked to school, they encountered a sight that would spark another remarkable chapter in their story. A small group of children stood hesitating at the entrance to Pine Grove Elementary, clearly new to the school. One boy, about Tommy's age, seemed particularly anxious, clutching his backpack with white knuckles. Max's ears perked up immediately. Before Tommy could react, his faithful companion was already padding gently toward the nervous child. The boy, startled at first, froze in place. But Max knew exactly what to do. He sat quietly nearby, offering his calming presence just as he had done for Tommy in the forest that fateful day. "His name is Max," Tommy said, approaching the group. "He's really friendly. He actually saved my life once." The nervous boy, who introduced himself as Michael Chen, slowly reached out to pet Max. I don't like new places," he admitted, quietly. "At my old school, kids made fun of me because I get scared easily." Tommy smiled, understanding. "I used to be scared of a lot of things too, but Max taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means facing your fears anyway." That simple encounter led to something extraordinary. Dr. Cooper, who'd been researching animal-assisted therapy programs, approached the school board with a proposal. Max's natural ability to comfort anxious children could help other students, like Michael. "We've seen how Max's presence affects children," she explained during the board meeting. "His combination of military training and gentle nature makes him uniquely qualified to serve as a therapy dog." The Andersons supported the idea wholeheartedly. 3 days a week, Max now accompanied Tommy to school, wearing a special vest that identified him as a certified therapy dog. During lunch breaks and designated sessions, he would help students dealing with anxiety, social challenges, or just bad days. Michael Chen became one of Max's regular visitors. "It's like he knows exactly when I need him," the boy told his parents, who had been worried about his transition to the new school. "He doesn't judge or try to fix things. He just stays with me until I feel better." Emily, inspired by Max's new role, started a Paws for Peace program at the school, where students could learn about animal-assisted therapy and emotional support animals. She often brought in rescue dogs from Pine Grove Animal Haven, helping them socialize while teaching her peers about responsible pet ownership. "Max isn't just changing lives anymore," Emily explained during a presentation. "He's teaching us how to change lives too." The impact rippled through the community in surprising ways. Local businesses started becoming more pet-friendly. The library introduced a Read to Dogs program where struggling readers could practice without judgment. Even the senior center began regular visits from therapy animals, inspired by Max's success at the school. Sarah Mitchell returned to Pine Grove for a special event, the first graduation ceremony of the therapy dog training program she had helped establish in honor of her father. Max sat proudly beside her as she addressed the gathered crowd. "My father believed that dogs have an extraordinary capacity for healing," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Max has proved that in ways we never could have imagined. He didn't just save one life in that forest, he started a movement that continues to save lives every day." The ceremony was particularly meaningful for Tommy, who had been helping train new therapy dogs alongside Sarah during her visits. His experience with Max had given him unique insight into the bond between humans and animals. Sometimes the best teachers have 4 legs, Tommy told a documentary crew that had come to film Max's story. Max showed me that everyone deserves a chance to show who they really are inside. One of the most touching moments came when Michael Chen's parents approached the Andersons after a school concert. Their son, who had once been too anxious to perform in public, had just played piano in front of the whole school, with Max lying calmly beside the piano bench. "We tried everything," Michael's mother said, wiping away tears. "Counseling, medication, different schools. But somehow, this dog has helped our son find his courage." David Anderson, who had once questioned the wisdom of pet ownership, now found himself regularly speaking at business conferences about the impact of animal-assisted programs in the workplace. The insurance company he worked for had become a national leader in covering therapy animal services. "It's not just about having a pet," he would explain. "It's about recognizing that healing and growth can come from the most unexpected sources." Rachel had started a support group for parents of anxious children, with Max as the group's unofficial mascot. The sight of the former stray, now helping other children overcome their fears, never failed to move her. "Max's journey reminds us that our past challenges don't define us," she told the group. "They prepare us to help others facing similar struggles." Mrs. Wilson, whose porch had become a regular meeting spot for the therapy dog program, loved watching Max work with the children. "That dog has more wisdom than most people I know," she would say, offering treats to the therapy dogs in training. "He seems to know exactly who needs him most on any given day." As spring approached, Pine Grove prepared for another milestone, the first annual Service and Therapy Dog Appreciation Day. The event would bring together military working dogs, search and rescue teams, and therapy animals from across the state. Max's statue in the park had become a symbol of hope, with people often leaving small tokens of gratitude at its base. Notes from children he had helped, photos of pets who had been rescued, and stories of lives transformed. The most powerful testament to Max's impact came in the form of a letter from Michael Chen, read aloud at a school assembly. "Before I met Max, I thought being different meant being alone. But he showed me that our differences are what make us special." He was a military dog who became a stray, who became a hero, who became a therapy dog. He didn't let his past stop him from helping others. "Now I know that I can be brave too, even when I'm scared." Thank you, Max, for teaching me that heroes come in all forms, and that it's okay to need help sometimes. If this story has moved, you please subscribe and share it with others who might need a reminder that sometimes our greatest challenges lead us to our greatest purpose. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful stories of hope, healing, and the extraordinary capacity of animals to transform lives. Let us know in the comments how an animal has helped you overcome a challenge, because every story of courage deserves to be heard. As Pine Grove prepared for its first Service and Therapy Dog Appreciation Day, nature had other plans. A severe spring storm system was approaching the region, promising to be one of the worst in decades. Ranger Miller had called an emergency community meeting at the Pine Grove Community Center. "The forecast shows potential flooding along the river," he explained, pointing to weather maps. "We need to be prepared for evacuations, especially in the lower-lying areas." The Andersons listened intently, with Max lying alert at their feet. The dog's military training seemed to kick in during crisis situations, and he appeared to understand the gravity of the meeting. Tommy noticed how Max's ears twitched at certain words, just as they had in the forest that day. Dr. Cooper stood up to address the gathering. "We need to consider our animal rescue plan. The shelter is in the flood zone, and we currently have 37 animals in our care. She glanced at Max, who had already become something of a mascot for animal rescue operations. We'll need all hands on deck for this one. The next 48 hours became a race against time. The therapy dog program, originally planned for school support, transformed into an emergency response team. Max, along with 5 other certified therapy dogs, helped keep evacuated children calm at the emergency shelter set up in the high school. Gymnasium. Michael Chen, who had made remarkable progress with his anxiety thanks to Max, surprised everyone by volunteering to help. "Max taught me how to be brave," he told his worried parents. "Now it's my turn to help others who are scared." The storm hit with devastating force. The river swelled beyond its banks, and water began creeping into the lower parts of town. The animal shelter, despite sandbagging efforts, was taking on water. That's when Max's military training and rescue instincts combined in an extraordinary way. During the evacuation of the shelter, 2 elderly cats had hidden in the building's crawl space, refusing to come out. The water was rising, and time was running out. Max, who had been helping guide scared animals to transport vehicles, suddenly became very agitated. "He wants to go in," Tommy said, recognizing the same determination he'd seen the day Max had. "Found him in the forest." Dr. Cooper hesitated. The building wasn't stable, and sending anyone in was risky. But Max's training and instincts had never been wrong. With safety gear attached and a rescue team standing by, Max was allowed to enter the building. The dog moved with purpose, navigating the partially flooded spaces with the precision of his military training days. Within minutes, his barking led rescuers to the cat's location, and all 3 animals were brought to safety. But Max wasn't done. Throughout the night, he worked tirelessly alongside emergency responders. His presence calmed frightened pets during evacuations, and his keen senses helped locate several animals who had fled in panic. The therapy dog program's training, combined with his search and rescue background, made him invaluable. Sarah Mitchell, who had returned to town for the planned Appreciation Day, found herself working alongside her father's beloved dog once again. "This is what he was born to do," she told the Andersons, watching Max guide a scared German Shepherd into a rescue vehicle. "He's combining everything he's ever learned: military training, therapy work, and pure instinct to help others." The crisis brought out the best in Pine Grove. The Max Mitchell Anderson Initiative's network sprang into action, with therapy dog teams from neighboring communities arriving to help. Mrs. Wilson's porch became a coordination center for animal rescue efforts, her famous pet treats providing comfort to both animals and humans. Emily's Paws for Peace students showed remarkable maturity, helping organize supplies and comfort younger children at the evacuation center. Max taught us that age doesn't matter when it comes to helping others, she explained to a news crew covering the crisis. "What matters is being there when you're needed." One of the most powerful moments came when Michael Chen, inspired by Max's courage, helped calm a group of frightened first graders during a particularly loud thunderclap. "Would you like to hear about my friend Max?" he asked them, his own voice steady despite his usual anxiety. "He's a very special dog who teaches us all about being brave." The storm raged for 3 days. When it finally passed, Pine Grove began the process of assessing the damage and cleaning up. The animal shelter had suffered significant damage, but thanks to the early evacuation and Max's heroic efforts, not a single animal was lost. The planned service and therapy dog appreciation day was postponed, but something more meaningful took its place. The community organized a spontaneous celebration of all the animals and people who had helped during the crisis. Max, still wearing his mud-splattered therapy dog vest, sat proudly among his fellow working dogs. "We had planned to honor these animals for their daily service," David Anderson addressed the gathered crowd. Instead, they showed us what that service really means. These aren't just trained animals. They're partners, protectors, and heroes. The experience led to new developments in Pine Grove's emergency response planning. Dr. Cooper and Sarah Mitchell collaborated on a program to train therapy dogs specifically for disaster response. The Max Mitchell Anderson initiative expanded to include emergency preparedness for animal shelters. Tommy, watching Max sleep exhausted after his days of service, reflected on how far they'd come from that day in the forest. "You never stopped being a hero, did you, boy?" he whispered, scratching Max's ears. "You just found new ways to help people." The local paper's coverage of Max's role in the crisis went viral, adding another chapter to his already remarkable story. But perhaps the most touching response came from Michael Chen, who wrote a poem for the school newspaper. "In storms that shake our world apart, in darkness deep and fears so strong, a hero with a golden heart shows us where we belong. Not all angels have their wings. Some have paws and loving eyes, teaching us the bravest things to help others when they rise." Thank you, Max, for showing me that courage wears many faces, and sometimes heroes simply be in the most unexpected places. If this story has touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with others. Your support helps us continue sharing these remarkable tales of courage, service, and the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals. Leave a comment below about a time when an animal helped you through a crisis, because every story of hope deserves to be heard. 2 years after Max's initial rescue of Tommy, Pine Grove faced a different kind of challenge. The town had recovered from the spring floods. The therapy dog program was thriving, and Max had become a living legend. But time, as it always does, had brought changes that no one was quite prepared for. It started with small things. Max, taking longer to get up in the mornings, moving a bit slower during his therapy sessions at school. Dr. Cooper noticed it during his regular checkup, the slight stiffness in his joints, the touch of gray around his muzzle. "Max is getting older," she explained gently to the Anderson family. "The hard life he had as a stray, combined with his military service and all his rescue work, has taken its toll on his body. We need to start thinking about reducing his workload." The news hit Tommy particularly hard. Now 10 years old, he had grown increasingly aware of the passage of time, but somehow he'd never thought about Max growing older. The dog was his hero, his guardian angel. Surely heroes lasted forever. "But he loves helping people," Tommy protested, his voice cracking. "We can't just make him stop." Rachel pulled her son close, sharing a knowing look with David. They had seen this coming, had noticed the subtle signs themselves. Emily, now 14 and wise beyond her years, suggested a solution. "Maybe Max doesn't need to stop completely," she said. "Maybe he just needs to teach others what he knows, like he taught us." The idea sparked something new in Pine Grove. The therapy dog program evolved to include what they called the Max Mentorship Program, where experienced therapy dogs would work alongside younger dogs in training. Max, with his unique combination of military background and natural empathy, became the perfect senior advisor. Michael Chen, who had overcome so much of his anxiety with Max's help, took a special interest in the program. "Max showed me that sometimes the best way to heal is to help others heal," he explained during a school presentation. "Now he's showing us that there's wisdom in slowing down." The change in Max's role revealed new depths to his abilities. While he might not run as fast or work as long, his gentle presence had an almost magical effect on nervous young therapy dogs in training. It was as if he could communicate decades of experience through a simple look or gesture. Sarah Mitchell, who visited regularly to help with the program, saw her father's training philosophy living on through Max. "Dad always said that the best teachers lead by example," she shared during a training session. Max isn't just teaching other dogs, he's teaching all of us about grace and adaptation. Mrs. Wilson, who still maintained her porch as a gathering spot for the community's dogs and their humans, noticed something remarkable. The younger dogs watch him, she observed. They're learning not just how to work, but how to age with dignity. One particularly touching moment came during a therapy session at Pine Grove Elementary. A new therapy dog in training, a young golden retriever named Luna, was struggling with a challenging situation, a child having a panic attack. Max, who had been resting in his favorite corner, slowly got up and demonstrated exactly what to do. Lying down at just the right distance, showing exactly the right calming signals. It was like watching a master teach an apprentice, Dr. Cooper remarked. These are things we can't train. They come from experience and instinct. Max is passing on his legacy. The Andersons adapted their home routine to accommodate Max's changing needs. Tommy, showing remarkable maturity, started paying attention to subtle signs of Max's discomfort and adjusted their activities accordingly. Instead of long walks, they had quiet bonding sessions in the backyard. Rather than playing fetch, they worked on gentle training exercises with the younger therapy dogs. David, watching his son's growing awareness and compassion, realized that Max was still teaching them, just in different ways. He taught us about heroism when he saved Tommy, he said during a community meeting. Now he's teaching us about dignity and grace in life's transitions. The story took an unexpected turn when the local middle school initiated a writing project about life lessons learned from animals. Emily's essay about Max won first place, but it was her public reading that moved everyone to tears. We often think heroes are about grand gestures and dramatic rescues. Max taught us that true heroism is also about the quiet moments, the patience to sit with someone who's afraid, the wisdom to know when to step back, and the grace to accept change. He saved my brother's life in one dramatic moment, but he's been saving all of us in small ways every day since then. Now, as he shows us how to age with dignity, how to adapt without losing purpose, he's teaching us perhaps his most important lesson yet, that love and service come in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest strength is in knowing when to change course. The essay sparked a new initiative in Pine Grove. The Max Mitchell Anderson Initiative expanded to include a senior therapy dog program, providing gentle companionship to elderly residents in the community. Max, moving at his own pace, became a regular visitor at the senior center, where residents found special comfort in a hero who understood the dignity of aging. Tommy, who had initially struggled with the changes in Max, found himself growing in unexpected ways. He started helping with the younger therapy dogs, sharing the special knowledge he'd gained from his years with Max. "He's still my hero," Tommy told a group of new therapy dog handlers. "He's just teaching me new ways to be brave." During one particularly meaningful session, Max demonstrated an uncanny ability to identify which therapy dogs were best suited for different kinds of service. A high-energy young dog who seemed unsuitable for calm therapy work showed remarkable focus when Max guided him toward more active service training. Another dog, too timid for traditional service work, blossomed under Max's guidance into a gentle presence, perfect for working with anxious children. Rachel observed that Max seemed to find new purpose in this mentorship role. "He's not just passing on skills," she noted, "he's passing on his heart." If this story speaks to you about the many ways our animal companions continue to teach and inspire us, please subscribe and share it with others. Your support helps us continue sharing these profound tales of love, adaptation, and the endless ways our four-legged friends enrich our lives. Share in the comments how an animal has taught you about grace in life's transitions, because every story of growth and transformation deserves to be heard. 3 years to the day after Max rescued Tommy in Evergreen Forest, Pine Grove gathered for a remarkable celebration. The Max Mitchell Anderson initiative had reached a milestone: 100 successful therapy dog placements across the country. The program had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined, touching lives in ways that seemed almost miraculous. The celebration was held in Riverside Park, near Max's statue, which had become a symbol of hope for the community. Now moving, more slowly but still carrying himself with dignity, Max lay contentedly beside Tommy as speakers shared stories of lives transformed by the program he had inspired. Dr. Cooper took the podium first, emotion clear in her voice. When we first met Max, he was a stray who had somehow found his way to exactly where he needed to be. Today, we celebrate not just his heroic rescue of Tommy, but the countless quiet rescues that have followed, moments of healing, connection, and transformation that might never have happened without his example. The crowd included families from across the country who had been touched by the program. Among them was a young girl named Sophia, who had received one of the program's therapy dogs after losing her mother. Her dog, Luna, the same one Max had, mentored months earlier, had helped her find her voice again after months of silence. Before Luna, Sophia shared shyly, holding her therapy dog's leash, I didn't think I would ever feel happy again. But she showed me what Max showed Tommy, that sometimes angels have 4 paws instead of wings. Michael Chen, who had blossomed from an anxious child into a confident young advocate for animal-assisted therapy, stood to share his own story. Max didn't just help me overcome my fears, he explained. He showed me how to help others overcome theirs. That's what real heroes do. They inspire us to become heroes ourselves. The initiative had evolved in beautiful and unexpected ways. Sarah Mitchell had established a scholarship program for veterans interested in training service dogs, naming it after her father. Dad always said that dogs have a wisdom we're only beginning to understand, she told the gathering. Max has proved that over and over again. Emily, now deep into her research on animal-assisted therapy for her high school science project, presented data showing the program's impact. We've seen a 70% reduction in anxiety levels among students working with therapy dogs, she reported. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. The real magic is in the moments that can't be measured. The first smile of a child who's been through trauma. The first words of someone who's been silent. The first step toward healing. Tommy, now 11, had prepared something special for the occasion. With Max lying at his feet, he unfolded a piece of paper and began to read. 3 years ago, I was a lost boy in a dark forest. I was scared and alone, and I thought no one would find me. But Max did more than find me. He showed me the way home. Not just the way back to my family, but the way to who I was meant to be. Some people say Max is getting old now, that he can't do all the things he used to do. But they're missing the point. Max isn't just about running fast or working long hours. He's about love that doesn't give up, courage that doesn't fade, and wisdom that only grows stronger with time. Every morning, when I wake up, Max is there. He might move slower, but his love is just as strong. When we visit the school together, I see how the younger therapy dogs look up to him. They're learning what I learned, that being a hero isn't about being perfect or powerful. It's about being there when someone needs you, no matter what. As Tommy spoke, Max raised his head and gazed at him with those wise, loving eyes that had seen so much. The bond between them was palpable, touching everyone who witnessed it. Max taught me that fear doesn't have to control us, he shared with the group. Sometimes helping others face their fears helps us face our own. The most powerful moment came when they reached the clearing where Max had found Tommy 5 years ago. Emily, who had documented the entire journey of the Max Mitchell Anderson initiative for her senior project, captured the scene on video as Tommy shared the full story. I was so scared that day, he admitted, his hand resting on Max's head. But Max knew exactly what to do. He didn't just lead me home, he showed me how to be brave. And now, all these years later, he's still teaching us. Dr. Cooper, who had joined the expedition with several therapy dogs in training, observed how Max's presence changed the entire atmosphere of the forest. "It's remarkable," she noted. "Even now, he has this ability to make people feel safe. Younger dogs pick up on it too. They're calmer, more focused when he's around." The children were particularly moved by the demonstration of how therapy dogs approach someone in distress. Max, though slower now, still showed perfect technique, approaching a volunteer child with exactly the right combination of gentle interest and respectful distance. "See how he doesn't rush in," Tommy explained to the group. "That's what he did with me that day. He knew I was scared, so he let me trust him at my own pace. Now he teaches other dogs to do the same thing." Mrs. Wilson, who had insisted on coming despite the walk being challenging for her, shared her perspective with the parents. "What we're seeing today isn't just about forest safety," she said. "It's about the wisdom that can only come from experience, and the beauty of passing that wisdom on to others." During a break in the program, Rachel watched her son leading the group with pride. "Sometimes I look at Tommy and can hardly believe he's the same boy," she confided to Sarah Mitchell. "Max didn't just save his life that day. He helped shape who Tommy would become." David, who had been filming the entire program for their documentation, captured a particularly touching moment when a young girl with autism, who had been hesitant to join the group, slowly approached Max. The old dog, showing his characteristic intuition, remained perfectly still as she carefully touched his fur. "That's his gift," Emily explained to the observers. "He knows exactly what each person needs, whether it's a playful nudge or just quiet presence. And he's taught that to every therapy dog in our program." The day's events culminated in a special ceremony at Max's statue, where Tommy unveiled a new addition, a series of brass paw prints leading from the forest edge to the statue, marking the actual path Max had taken while leading him to safety. Each paw print contained a different safety tip or piece of wilderness wisdom. "These prints will be here long after we're gone," Tommy told the gathering. "Just like Max's lessons will continue through all the dogs and people he's helped train. That's what a true legacy looks like." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, the group made their way back to the parking area. Max walked slowly but steadily, occasionally pausing to let younger dogs catch up or to comfort a tired child. His age was showing, but his spirit remained as strong as ever. Sarah Mitchell, watching him with the children, smiled through tears. "You know," she said to the Andersons, "my father would be so proud. He always said a dog's greatest purpose is to make the world better for others. Max has done that in ways we never could have imagined." The Forest Safety Program became another branch of Max's growing legacy, teaching children not just how to stay safe in the wilderness, but how to understand and respect the natural world. It was a perfect complement to the therapy dog program, combining practical skills with emotional intelligence. If this story has touched your heart and reminded you of the profound impact one act of kindness can have, please subscribe and share it with others. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful stories of love, courage, and the extraordinary ways animals enrich our lives. Share in the comments your own experience of learning valuable life lessons from an animal companion, because every story of wisdom and growth deserves to be heard. 6 years after that fateful day in Evergreen Forest, Pine Grove gathered once again, this time for a different kind of celebration, Max's Legacy Day. The event wasn't planned. Rather, it arose spontaneously after a remarkable sequence of events that proved Max's influence extended far beyond what anyone could have imagined. It began when a massive search and rescue operation was launched in a neighboring county. A group of hikers had gone missing during an unexpected storm, and among the response team were 5 therapy dogs who had graduated from the Max Mitchell Anderson initiative. These dogs, trained in both comfort and rescue work, helped locate the missing hikers and kept them calm until help arrived. The rescue made national news, not just for its success, but for the extraordinary way the therapy dogs had combined. Their skills, a direct result of Max's unique training approach. Tommy, now 13, watched the coverage with tears in his eyes, his hand resting on Max's graying head. "You taught them that, boy," he whispered. "You showed them how to be, both brave and gentle." Max, now in his senior years, spent most of his days in quiet retirement, yet his presence remained as powerful as ever. Though he no longer participated actively in therapy sessions, he had become what Dr. Cooper called a wisdom keeper for the program, an elder statesman who could calm anxious dogs and guide nervous handlers with just his presence. The success of the rescue operation prompted a documentary filmmaker to visit Pine Grove, wanting to capture the story of the dog who had inspired such an effective training program. As the community shared their memories and experiences, something beautiful emerged, a tapestry of lives transformed by one stray dog's extraordinary heart. Michael Chen, now confident and poised, spoke about how Max had changed his understanding of courage. "People think bravery means not being afraid," he explained to the camera. "Max taught me that true courage is about being there for others, even when you're scared yourself." Emily's research on the initiative's impact had earned her a scholarship to veterinary school. "What Max created goes beyond therapy or rescue work," she presented. "He showed us that healing is a two-way street. Every dog in our program not only helps others, but finds their own purpose in the process." Sarah Mitchell had expanded her father's training methods to include what she called the Max Protocol, a combination of military precision and emotional intelligence that was revolutionizing service dog training across the country. Max bridged two worlds, she explained. He combined the discipline of his military background with an innate understanding of human emotions. That's what makes this program unique. The celebration culminated in a gathering at Riverside Park, where Max's statue had become a symbol of hope for the community. Dogs and handlers from across the country came to share their stories, each one a testament to the ripple effect of that one rescue in the forest. A particularly moving moment came when a young girl named Lucy, who had received one of the last therapy dogs Max had personally helped train, stood to speak. Her dog, Bear, had helped her overcome severe trauma, and now they worked together, helping other children heal. "Max never met me," Lucy said, her voice clear and strong, "but his love reaches me through Bear. That's what makes his legacy so special. It keeps growing, touching more lives, creating more miracles." As the day progressed, Tommy shared a journal entry he had written about Max's impact on his life. "Some people measure time in years, but I measure it in lessons learned from my best friend. Max taught me that being lost isn't the end of the story. It's often the beginning. He showed me that our worst moments can lead to our greatest purpose. Most importantly, he taught me that love isn't just about what we feel. It's about what we do with those feelings." Every morning when I see Max's gray muzzle and gentle eyes, I'm reminded that heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear fur, walk on four legs, and show us that the purest form of love is the kind that keeps giving long after the initial act of courage. David Anderson, who had documented every phase of Max's journey, presented a compilation of photographs and videos showing the progression of the initiative. From that first desperate day in the forest to the hundreds of successful therapy dog placements, each image told a story of transformation. Rachel, watching the presentation, reflected on how their family had changed. "Max didn't just rescue Tommy that day," she said. "He rescued all of us from the limitations we had placed on our own hearts." Mrs. Wilson, now using a wheelchair, but still hosting therapy dog training sessions from her porch, shared her perspective on Max's legacy. "Love multiplies," she said simply. Max loved without conditions, served without hesitation, and taught without judgment. Now hundreds of dogs carry that legacy forward, and thousands of lives are better for it. The day ended with a candlelight ceremony around Max's statue. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the park, Tommy led Max slowly to the front of the gathering. The old dog moved carefully but with dignity, his tail still wagging gently at the sight of familiar faces. "Look around," Tommy addressed the crowd, his hand resting on Max's head. "Every person here has been touched by Max's love, either directly or through one of the dogs he helped train. But his greatest gift wasn't just saving me that day in the forest. It was showing us all that we have the capacity to be heroes in our own way." If this story has moved you, please subscribe to see more incredible tales of hope, courage, and the extraordinary bonds between humans and animals. Up next, we have 2 more amazing stories that will touch your heart just as deeply. Don't miss them. Click through to discover more tales of remarkable animals who changed lives forever. And remember, every time you share these stories, you help spread a message of hope and the incredible power of unconditional love. Leave a comment below about how an animal has touched your life, and join our community of believers in the extraordinary ability of animals to heal, inspire, and transform our world.